This is a fully official hot seat list from Pat Bailey, and here it is right now. Check it out. Beautiful. Beautiful right there. And everything, the best part about it, guys, is that is 100% exactly correct. And I can tell you that, Christian, what's the stat? What's the stat that we're going to tell the viewers about?
I was looking online.
Coaches usually get terminated in the NFL.
So it's about 6 to 8 coaches get fired every year.
6 to 8 coaches. And before I knew that stat, how many coaches are in the hot seat at this point on my tier list?
That would be 7. Yeah.
7, the average between 6 and 8. Okay, I was just making sure. My intuition was good. Okay. Yep. But it is, so as Christian said, about 6 to 8 coaches every season roughly can expect to be fired. So it's going to be hard to predict, but I think that we can argue of a few of these. But I think that we're in a decent position in terms of where we're at with these hot seat head coaches. So we'll run through quickly the categories here. We got hot seats. These are the coaches that are at the greatest risk of losing their job. I think that very few things have to go wrong for these coaches to be terminated. And everything needs to go right. The teams need to push for the playoffs. Every single one of these teams is going to have high expectations if they're planning on keeping their coach. Otherwise, I think that it's kind of a foregone conclusion that he'll be fired in Dennis Allen's case. Then you got the warm. I can keep explaining it's hot seat to a lesser degree, closer to the cool, which is even lesser than warm. So you've got safer coaches going further down the spectrum. And I want to point out AC Chilling. These are my coaches where I think that they would outlast a disaster for their team. So if something went horribly wrong, let's say the entire house burns down for that organization, I think that these coaches would possibly even outlast their quarterback. I mean, I don't think that we don't have to worry about that with Andy Reid. Probably not with Matt LaFleur. I have different opinions than others, maybe. But well, we can leave that argument for another day. But essentially, we're talking about coaches that are most at risk of losing their jobs in this discussion. And then I want to point out, at least on my end, my lukewarm coaches are the rookie coaches, and I think that that's a fair and appropriate way to assess them. I think Jared Mayo probably, if you're going to talk about any of these guys being more at risk of losing their job next season, it's probably Jared Mayo. If you're talking about someone who could just be replaced by maybe an opportunistic hire for an offensive coach to develop a young quarterback, but I don't necessarily think that that would be because of some horrific, terrible season that Gerard Mayo was the reason for. I think that that's just going to be the reality for the Patriots. But those lukewarm coaches, I think I'm giving them a chance to either put themselves in warm or cool. Otherwise, I think that my list is solid. So we can start walking through this, and you guys can tell me whether you disagree or not. And we can start right off the bat. At the top for me is Sean McDermott. This is not in order, I will say. This hot seat list is not fully in order. I do think that if we were going to say someone was on the hottest seat, I don't know if you guys would both agree, but I'm calling it as Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh has to be on the hottest seat for me.
Bob.
I think that, yeah, let's just start off talking about Robert Saleh, and then we can bounce back to Sean McDermott, because I think that's all where we want to talk about, to be honest. Starting off with Robert Saleh, this guy has everything riding on this season. Everything is riding on 2024 as it stands with this guy's NFL career. He could be a New York legend, the man that brought the Jets a Super Bowl as their head coach, or at least helped shepherd the Jets to a Super Bowl. He could be in lore forever as a New York legend, or he could be on the street pretty early in this season if things go horribly wrong. So I think that Robert Saleh, high expectations are going to be what puts him on the hot seat this season.
I've got him as the hottest seat going into 2024, Pat, and for a lot of the reasons that you said. I mean, it's a credit to Joe Douglas with just how he constructed this roster and the fact that, if God forbid something does happen to Aaron Rodgers, you're not trotting out, you know, the scapegoat in Zach Wilson out there. You actually brought in Tyrod Taylor to support. You had already made the investment into the offensive line in both the draft with Fashanu and bringing in Tyron Smith. I think Tyrod Taylor is going to be one of the most important people on the Jets if, God forbid, Rodgers were to aggravate, his Achilles, go down again. Robert Saleh has someone that has at least been there and can at least keep you in games and not exactly cost you every game as it was almost seeming like Zach Wilson was doing. So no, I agree with you. I think Saleh has the hottest seat going into 2024 just based off the expectations and how this roster has been constructed and what the window is that they have to win, which is Lord knows how much longer Aaron Rodgers is going to play, especially coming off the Achilles. It could be 2 more years at tops for Salah, or for Rodgers, and then Salah, if it does go wrong, could be even less.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that point, Mike, I do think it really comes down to Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh. That relationship already feels like it's like almost deteriorate. It's already fully deteriorated. And I can't see Aaron not winning a championship this year and retiring. I can't see it. And to me, it's just inevitable that if Aaron comes back, I cannot see Robert Saleh come back to the same team. It starts with not just this offseason. I think last offseason, you kind of saw it with Hard Knocks. You kind of saw kind of the lack of connection with some guys. Now, he can coach a defense, so it doesn't necessarily matter his relationship with certain guys in the locker room. But I thought this year, the whole excuse absences thing with Aaron Rodgers already put stress on a team that is under the microscope, being in New York and putting all of these seasoned veterans on a team for really a year-long mission to do well in a really extremely big market. And yeah, I'm not nothing to do with the players playing this year. I think they could have a really successful season. But
they've got one of the best defenses in the NFL.
Yep. They do.
When you talk about defensive line, linebackers, secondary, they may have top to bottom across the board the three best position groups at defense. I would argue with the secondary just based on how big of a Bears fan I am. I would argue with them having the best secondary, but they can make a claim to having the best secondary, best linebackers, and best defensive line in the NFL. So all the tools are there, and they have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. So all the tools are there for Robert Saleh. But I'll let you finish, Christian.
And for some reason, I still can't see them getting over the hump this year. I don't think many teams or many pundits do see them winning a Super Bowl this year.
No, and you want to know, you want to say for whatever reason, I'll tell you the reason. It's coaching. It's your coach. You hired the offensive coordinator, the play caller, because he's Aaron Rodgers' friend. You had to remove him from the role. You had to promote a shadow offensive coordinator over him. You've had just headache after headache with Robert Saleh as head coach of the Jets. It hasn't been a smooth sailing experience. So you just have to win this year, Robert Saleh, if you want to keep your job. The clown show is over. You need to win or get out, and that's going to be his ultimatum for the Jets this season. That's why I have him as the hottest seat this year.
And, I mean, you didn't get Aaron Rodgers to go 9-8 and enter a division this year where you're plus 170 favorites to win the division to then come up short anything less than, I think, a first round exit in the playoffs gets Robert Saleh fired in this. And I mean, it is put up or shut up. So yeah,
we kind of did talk about the schedule early on. It's you look at the schedule, San Francisco week 1, but then you got Tennessee, New England, Denver, Minnesota.
It's favorable.
So you're looking at a chance to be 4-1. I mean, And if you're not 4-1, what went horribly wrong in the first 5 weeks of the season for you to not be 4-1? I mean, if it's an Aaron Rodgers injury, scrap the whole thing, scrap the whole concept. But I think there's going to be so much success early on through the first 11 weeks that anything that they could do in the playoffs, not short of getting to the Super Bowl, is going to be a letdown. And again, I think it comes down to you choosing between one more year of Aaron Rodgers or whatever Robert Saleh has going on, which is an incredible defense. I just don't know I don't know if you can pass up on the last year of Aaron Rodgers, especially if he has a good season and they can win these winnable games through the first 11 weeks of the season.
And Christian, off of that point, I want to just Pat, did you have any more thoughts on Robert Saleh? Because there's another coach on this on the hot seat that I think is right under Robert Saleh in having the second hottest seat in the NFL, because they paid a quarterback as well, and you're going into another year of him coming off an injury, and the backup plan is none too great, and that's Dennis Allen. I think Dennis Allen is on the second hottest seat right after Robert Saleh, all because this is a division that everyone has made moves to try and compete, because they know it is not just one team's for the taking. I mean, you look at Atlanta, you look at Tampa Bay. Both teams, I mean, the Panthers that's a different story, because there is a lot that still needs to be done with them. But
watch out for the Panthers.
You watch out for the Panthers. I agree. I agree. Watch out for the Panthers. But no, Dennis Allen is the second hottest seat in the NFL, albeit because your backup plan to Derek Carr is Spencer Rattler, and if you have to be giving Spencer Rattler meaningful playing time, the season's already done with. And I think they do still have a good defensive unit, but with the money that you have spent on Derek Carr and what you expect, and they have at least put some pieces around him, I think, to at the very least be competitive in their division. But as I said, it's a division that I think any one of those teams can win. I think Dennis Allen is right next to Robert Saleh with flames under his seat.
It's interesting the way you mentioned that, because then if you look at this division, you've got Dennis Allen, you've got Todd Bowles, you've got Raheem Morris, you've got Dave Canales. This kind of feels like win and you keep your job, lose and you very well could be fired, and you're somewhere in the middle, you might be getting fired next year, because this is such a winnable division, and the expectations are so unique with each of these new coaches that I think Dennis Allen is definitely, I agree, Mike, that he's on the second hottest seat. I think that this is an organization that is somewhat rightfully impatient. They've been a bit spoiled by having Sean Payton as their head coach, and now having Dennis Allen step in and be such a disappointment in a winnable division. That's a shit that's going to get stale fast.
And he hasn't made the playoffs since he took the job, which I think it just underscores how hot his seat is. Because, as we continue to say, it's a division that if you just win the games you're supposed to win and pick off a few, I mean, no one is thinking that the person coming out of the NFC South is going to be a 12-win team and a juggernaut going into the playoffs. I think everyone is expecting, if I can get 9-8, if I can get 10-7, that's enough to win that division by a landslide. So I think the margin of error is just so little because of how similarly built those teams are. And yeah, I've said it again. I mean, I think Dennis Allen's seat is on fire going into this season.
I'll defend Dennis Allen. I think he's been a great defensive coach. I think if there's anything to look at with the Saints, maybe it's Mickey Loomis, their GM. Maybe the time has come. I think he's been the GM since 2002. It seems like this team has been on a kind of like a roster crunch or a salary cap crunch for the last, it almost seems like a decade now.
Yeah.
So I think maybe it's time to reset, and they're almost stuck in a position where they can't reset. But I don't know if Dennis Allen is on the hottest seat. I did have him on the hot seat for me. I'd be interested to see if Dennis Allen feels that he's on that hot of a seat. Does he go to Spencer Rattler quicker than any of us could predict because of that? I think if he does, then I'll 100% agree with you, Mike. I'd say then he's definitely knows he's on the hot seat, and I think everyone would be able to know he's on the hot seat. So if we see Rattler by week 8, week 9, week 10, I think sure. But right now, I do think maybe a little bit lower on the hot seat, but definitely something going on with New Orleans, some change. Looks like it's coming soon.
All right, Christian. Well, if you think that he's not the second hottest on the hot seat, who would you pick for your second hottest seat? I'm going to put you on the hot seat right now.
I would say, it's the lame duck head coach. I swear to God, I think Jerry Jones is. I think it's early onset dementia, man. I really do.
Oh wow!
Dude, did you hear?
Taking shots. We're taking shots on the bulletin board. Sports.
Dude, did you hear what he said?
No.
Now, honestly, you got to read the quote, but
okay.
The quote was insane for him. He was swearing. But to be fair to Jerry, it is him and Steven making the decisions as far as the draft is concerned. Jerry has done a great job in the draft. You can't really deny it at this point. He's gotten studs. But the contract situation
draft, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
He can evaluate talent.
He can definitely do that in the draft. But as far as everything else goes, like McCarthy is in the media talking about how hard it is to win 12 games. It doesn't seem like he's even come to grips with what happened in Green Bay. It's like they're still like
in Dallas. Green Bay came into Dallas and did that to them.
Yeah, and
I'm surprised he still has a job after that.
I think a lot of people are surprised he still has a job.
Yeah. So it's like I don't know. It's the only guy who really knows what's going on with what it feels like to be Mike McCarthy, honestly, right now is Joe Biden.
and Jerry Jones will, if this line doesn't tell you how hot Mike McCarthy's seat is going to be, Jerry Jones will not fire himself. That's not going to happen. No. So
son.
Or his son, and even given their lack of moves, in the offseason, poor Mike McCarthy, it literally all falls on his shoulders. But the guy has had 3 12-win seasons, in his tenure with the Cowboys, made the playoffs each time, but it just the Jerry standards, he's trying to get a Lombardi before, he rest in peace, kicks the bucket. And so
I want to read his quote real quick. So he said,
this is Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones quote.
Jerry Jones. So at 81 years old, some have questioned whether Jones should remain the man calling all the shots for his franchise. And he had an expletive-filled defense of himself when discussing the possibility of handing the keys to someone else. I've done it all. So I have an inordinate amount of confidence that, if anybody can figure out how to get this shit done, I can figure out how to get it done. I've been there every which way from Sunday, and I busted my ass a bunch. There's nobody living that's out cutting and shooting that can't give you a bunch of times they busted their ass. So hell no. There's nobody that could fucking come in here and do all the contracts and be a GM any better than I can.
Very eloquently put, Jerry.
Oh my God.
I don't know.
So this and then he told his sons Kendall and Roman and his daughter Shiv that they're fired from Waystar Royco and they need to go find their own jobs because that man sounds like the football Logan Roy. I'll tell you that right now for anyone who's that.
I will give Mike McCarthy the benefit of the doubt only in this part is that in that playoff game Mike McCarthy didn't give up 48 points to the Green Bay Packers. Mike McCarthy didn't play like Dak did against the Green Bay Packers. Mike McCarthy got them there. Has had 3 12-win seasons since he's become the coach of the Cowboys. But it's just, that's just a seat that unless you are competing for Super Bowls and Lombardis, I mean, it's going to be perpetually hot because Jerry's trying to win one while he
Right.
still can, while he can
I
still
like
like can still make those scribbles on the all-in plans.
I like the way you put it. I like that you said that just in managing McCarthy's expectations. McCarthy wasn't the one out there playing like Dak Prescott, but I would have loved to see Mike McCarthy out playing quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys against that Packers defense in that playoff game. That would have been entertaining to see. But I think that on a serious note with McCarthy, he is a victim of expectations. You had a Super Bowl winning season in Green Bay, and you had multiple, he had Aaron Rodgers, but he was leading that team to regular season success consistently. They owned the NFC North for all of the 2010s. And then he goes to Dallas, and he has, as you said, Mike, multiple double-digit winning seasons. This guy's got a Super Bowl ring. If he was doing all this stuff in Jacksonville, he would be a legend. He would be a Hall of Fame considered – a coach that's being considered for the Hall of Fame. But he's doing it for the Packers and then the Cowboys, so now the expectations are outsized compared to what he can produce. I think that Mike McCarthy, I'm generally higher on him than most fans would be. I think he's a guy that, like I said, is a bastion of regular season consistency, which is saying a lot more than many coaches in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when you're dealing with, as Christian laid out in that expletive-filled rant, when you're dealing with Jerry Jones, you need to be better than you need to be better than just consistent in the regular season. They're going to be expecting more results.
I mean, Jerry's always got 2 fingers of Johnny Walker going, smelling his shoes. I mean, that's just how it runs down in Dallas, and
but then he turns around and drafts Deron Bland. So
and then I mean we'll see. Give him props for roster construction. I think Jerry has done a well enough job to set them up in a good position. But as you said, he's not going to fire himself, and it's all going to fall on Mike McCarthy. And there's just, I mean, he's had some tough looks, and that playoff game is going to stink to high heaven until next playoffs, if they make it, and what they're going to do with it.
Boy, he'd better make it. The Cowboys would better make it for McCarthy's sake.
They should.
So we can, unless you guys have any other thoughts on McCarthy, I think we all agree that he's certainly on the hot seat. I really want to talk about Doug Peterson too, because this is a guy who, by all accounts, going into last season was looked at as a great coach for the Jaguars. He led them to a playoff win for the first time since 2018, progressing Trevor Lawrence. They had a rocky playoff game that they ended up turning around and having an amazing comeback, and then obviously running into a tougher AFC beyond that. And so you had high expectations going into last year, and then just an absolute collapse by the Jaguars towards the end of the season. And when you take a closer look at this roster, you have talent at wide receiver now with Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk. You've got a great tight end in Evan Ingram. Am I forgetting anybody on that?
Gabe Davis as well. Gabe Davis,
who they just signed as well. So you've got the weapons around Trevor Lawrence. You have Trevor Lawrence himself. You've signed him to be a great quarterback. And then you look at that defense as well, and you have 2 high-end edge rushers in Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen Hines. These 2 guys are both coming off double-digit sack seasons. This is a team that should be competing in the AFC South. I feel like a lot of people are writing them off in the sense that the Texans are just going to run away with that division. The expectations for a team with, as I said, 2 high-end edge rushers, elite quarterback, weapons around him, a great running back in Travis Etienne, they should be able to win a consistent amount or a decent amount of games this season to lead them to, if not the AFC South division, they should be competing for playoffs. Or I think that Doug Peterson will get fired if we see anything resembling the collapse that they had last year.
I think Pat and not that one person makes a team, but I think their free agency signing of Eric Armstead and shoring up what was the weakest part of their team, which was interior defensive line, is going to be a make or break move that could decide the season for them because I mean they were getting gashed up the middle last year. They finally get a stop plug, that they brought in from free agency, to do that with. They did address they also addressed, the offensive line, Ezra Cleveland, and I think it's Mitch or Mike Morse.
Mitch.
I think it's Mitch
Yeah,
Morse.
Mitch
Yeah,
Morse.
yeah. That
Good center.
he was a Pro Bowler in 2022. So I mean, they've addressed what they need to address. I think and it's year 3 of Trevor Lawrence. You're not going to move. You're not moving off him. I mean, he is first overall pick, so it does all fall on Doug Peterson this year. But I don't think. I think the expectations are high, but I think they have the talent to meet those expectations. It's just gonna. I mean, that's just gonna be a very difficult division to do it in. So I mean, it's a make or break year.
So are you keeping him on the hot seat, or would you knock him down to warm?
No, I would keep him on the hot seat, but as as kind of we talk about with Mike McCarthy, but in a more global or in a bigger sense, and talking about the division that he's
His
in, I think
expectations.
the expectations not just set forward by the team, but in that division, in what is going to be a difficult division, I would give him maybe some grace, but it's a win-or-loss league, so you got to get it done.
Yeah, and for Doug, it looks like they're still figuring out who's calling the plays. It's between him and Press Taylor, but
He better
I
be
do
calling the
agree.
plays.
I We'll
For
see.
his job, he better be calling the plays.
Yeah, I do think I somewhat understand what you're saying, Mike. I do think at the end of the day, there's only so many excuses you can have as a head football coach after 2-3 years. I do think they've put a tremendous amount of talent around Trevor Lawrence, who is a high-end guy. He's a high-end talent in this league. He was drafted as that. I do think with the amount of talent put around him, with the big free agency signing, there's no room to really change this roster anytime soon. So with that being said, it really comes down to if they can't get to the playoffs this year in a winnable division. It's going to be a tough division, but a winnable division for them. If they can't break through, it's got to fall on his hand. It's got to fall on his shoulders, and I think he's going to lose his job if they can't push through this year.
Right, and if it goes horribly wrong, and I think this is kind of how I want to frame a lot of these hot seat coaches. This is for me, if things go terribly wrong, who's it going to fall on? Some of these coaches in the lower tiers, I think they would be safer if things went terribly wrong. Doug Peterson is one guy. The way they built this roster, the way they just signed Trevor Lawrence to a long-term deal, $250+ million. This is going to be the next person out the door is going to be Doug Peterson if this team falls apart like they did last season.
And
so I think Doug Peterson is on the hot seat.
Sure. And I think following that, Pat, in terms of not just organizational pressure, but talk about the pressure of a city and an entire, just portion of the country. I think that brings us to the next guy, Nick Sirianni, who I will be honest, I'm surprised he has his job this year. He, both the coordinators are gone. His scapegoats are gone. The human meat shields, if you will, that would protect him from the onslaught, which is the Philadelphia media and Howie Roseman's wrath. I mean,
the play calling meat shields.
I like that they brought in Vic Fangio. I think that is going to be a major. It addresses a major problem in a defense that I would say cost them their season last year. In addition to some of Nick Sirianni's play calling, I mean, but it was an epic collapse, man. With a team with the Super Bowl expectations that they had, fresh off of a Super Bowl appearance. I mean, that was one of the worst collapses in sports with how potent their offense was. And Yes, Lane Johnson obviously got hurt later on in the season, and that hurt them. But he gave up the play calling duties, and just that already admitted to everyone that where are his hamper? What does he exactly do other than the rah rah and talking Rocky? Like, it's just, you gave up so much of the responsibilities that at the end of the day, if they're not performing and you're just not getting them ready to play, I mean, what's he doing there?
Yeah, and on top of Vic Fangio, they did add Kellen Moore. So yeah, there's really again no excuses for Sirianni. It's a good team. I am concerned about the defense as time goes on. I mean, still some concerns about the health and the sustainability of their roster and how durable their roster is.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. I mean, what does Sirianni do? People have been asking it for years, and now you're starting to see Jalen Hurts. Everyone knows there's friction between Jalen Hurts and Sirianni. One thing I will say about last year is Jalen Hurts was hurt. So I do want to give him some of the benefit of the doubt because he was hurt and you could tell he wasn't reading or he wasn't able to take off or escape as well as he was doing the year prior. But that does go back to Nick Sirianni. And I saw Nick Wright today. Pat, I know you love Nick Wright.
Well, careful putting words in my mouth.
But he made a good point today, and it was like even if like Jalen was hurt, he was questioning it earlier on his show today. He was saying even if he was hurt, why is Sirianni allowing this guy to do the tush push every play if this guy has a bad knee, which is even worse, even more indicative of what is Sirianni doing for this team. So I 100% agree. And I think Mike had 5 guys. If we look at his list real quick, just want to share, he had 5 guys on his hot seat. That rounds out his 5. So we can finish up.
So we hit Mike's 5. I do have a couple things I wanted to say on Sirianni in that I know I've talked before about my problems with him in terms of his in terms of just the way he operates as a professional, as a head coach. I think that he's probably a little quick to talk to the fans or, open himself up to negative press for a coach that doesn't have the Mike Ditka gravitas to necessarily do that type of thing. And it didn't work out for Ditka at all times either when you have that kind of demeanor. So you're playing a dangerous game when you're the hotshot head coach who is picking a fight constantly. I personally would want a head coach who was maybe a little more even-keeled and felt like he'd maybe been there before. But I think beyond that, the big issue with Sirianni is that 2022 team, 2022, feels like a distant memory at this point. When you talk about Shane Steichen, your offensive play caller, he's gone. You got Jonathan Gannon, your defensive play caller, he is gone. Jason Kelsey, massive loss. Your offensive captain, maybe the best center of this generation, he's gone. That is a huge difference. And I'm a big Landon Dickerson fan. Roll Tide, but damn, that is a big loss for that team. And so you're starting to see the foundation of that 21 team slowly crumble around him. And in terms of the coaching staff, quickly crumble around him. I think he's got good coaches at this point in the offensive and defensive coordinator spots. I love the hire of Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, but it gets back to the general theme. You guys touched on it. What are you contributing, Nick Sirianni, beyond picking fights with Chiefs fans on your way out of a win that you didn't call any plays for and you didn't make any plays in? So once again, I think Nick Sirianni is a little much more trouble than he's worth as a head coach for a team that talented. And I think to sum it up with Nick Sirianni, if your quarterback is demonstrably more professional than you and more polished than you, then you have a serious issue with your entire organization in terms of the hierarchy of professionalism. So I think that the Eagles are in a bad spot in that situation.
Yeah, just one final point for the Eagles. Everyone talks about losing Jason Kelsey too. I think a lot of things changed for Philly last year without Hargrave when he went to San Fran. I thought that was a huge loss last year. And then lastly, uh, we don't talk about him enough, but he's another Eagles Ring of Honor guy for sure, and that's Fletcher Cox. They lost Fletcher Cox as well. They don't talk about him as much as they talk about Jason, but he's also been an integral part to that Eagles organization as well.
No, so once again, I think that Nick Sirianni, it's a prove-it year for him as the head coach of the Eagles. That's a city that is going to be impatient when it comes to
He better not lose the division
with that roster.
Better not.
Yeah, this division is, especially with, as I said, with my other my other theme of Jerry Jones seemingly being asleep at the wheel with previously with the CeeDee Lamb contract and now with the Micah Parsons and Dak Prescott contracts. This is a division that is wide open for, or not necessarily wide open, but specifically in terms of the Cowboys being shorthanded. The Eagles should win this division. So I think if they don't, I think that's a simple way to look at it. I think if the Eagles don't win this division, it could be the end for Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia because this roster is just too damn talented.
Right.
So if that rounds out Mike's 5, we can go to then I guess Mike, you can defend these next two guys on my list. I do have Todd Bowles on the hot seat. I think similarly to Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni and Todd Bowles may be two of the most different coaches in terms of their demeanor and how they carry themselves. But I think they're in a similar situation, and I think that with the way the teams are set up and the way the division is lacking, these the Falcons are going to be a tough matchup for the Buccaneers, but I do think that the Buccaneers are set up to beat the Falcons. They're a team that's a couple of years ahead in their roster development in terms of the way they've gelled. So I think that once again, it's another case of just expectations. When you've got the expectations that a team like the Buccaneers has, they have the pieces in place. The quarterback, the defense, the wide receivers are still there. This was a team that won the division last year. Go do it again. I don't care that the Falcons made additions. This is a team that has to compete in this NFC South. Once again, it's looking more and more the way we talk through this. If you don't win the NFC South, you may be looking at losing your job.
I wonder. I think where a lot of the questions are going to come for Todd Bowles. Obviously, I think I'll give him credit for last year. I mean, the Bucs were 4-7 at one point, and he got them over 500 and were able to win the rock fight that is the NFC South and make it into the playoffs. They did just the thing I think that puts him most on the hot seat is that they just paid Baker Mayfield, so they have that contract. I think it would benefit them to start off better than 4-7 starting next year if Todd Bowles were to like to keep his job, just because of the questions with the roster. I mean, they were able to retain Chris Godwin, they were able to retain Mike Evans, but you just paid Baker. So all the pressure then does fall on Todd Bowles. I mean, what is it gonna look like as they bring in Liam Cohn and say goodbye to Dave Canales? Is it going to be different? Are we going to see? I mean, they have young pieces on the roster like Rashad White that have to move forward and have to get better to be. I mean, his spot is already up in the air with the running back competition that they have down in Tampa. But I think a lot of it is going to fall on Todd Bowles to just you got to win the NFC South at 9-8 in the steps that at least the Falcons have made to say, you know what, we're going for it this year. They have the new coach. They got nothing to lose because they're going to see what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins. I think a lot of the pressure on Todd Bowles is the fact that this is such a winnable division, and you have a team that has shown they can compete, but has also been has also lost to your detriment in terms of clock management and play calling in the past. So I think Todd Bowles definitely deserves to, if not be on the warmest seat, at least get on maybe one of the cooler hot seats, being that they made the playoffs last year.
Yeah, I actually had Bulls on my hot seat too, but he could cool down for sure. I do think it comes down to if he can win the division or not. I think at the beginning of the year I did have Atlanta higher than Tampa Bay, but the more that I look at the actual rosters, Pat, I like what you said. You said they're kind of further along in their developmental stage. I think what that means is I think they're built up front. Um, Both on offense and defense, kind of unlike Atlanta right now. I don't think Atlanta has the girth up front that these guys do with Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey. I think he's going to have a better year than he did last year. Um, so it's an incredibly good team. I could totally see them win the division. I think they have a talented team, a better interior group, I would say, offensively and defensively than Atlanta. But I do see a lot of similarities to Lovie Smith and his last year in Chicago, where if he doesn't make the playoffs, he went 10-6 that year. He got fired. If he's not in the playoffs, I see the same situation playing out for Todd Bowles. That's why I had him on my hot seat. It comes down to if they can win that division, but I do agree it really could go either way with Atlanta. I like Atlanta's skill players more, but Pat, like you said, I think they are better in some phases where it matters more. And then on top of that, they did add a center, Graham Barton. I think he is one of the top 3 centers in this class, in this draft class. One of their biggest, it looks like their biggest flaws last year was the center spot last year. Even when Tom Brady was there the year prior, I think that was a huge hole that they had to fill when
Jensen.
Forgot his name. Jensen went out. Yeah, he went out. And it seems like they've been trying to replace Jensen ever since he got injured. I think they did that with Graham Barton this year. So I'm going to give – I would say he was in my hot seat. I'm going to pull Todd Bowles down one level into the warm seat. But I could see it. If he doesn't win the division, I could see a Lovie Smith type departure from Todd Bowles for sure.
Yeah. I mean, once again, this is not about which team is going to be the worst. The Buccaneers are set up for success, so you better have success if you're Todd Bowles. And that's, once again, you said, Mike, Baker Mayfield got the contract. It's going to be Todd Bowles out the door first if it goes horribly wrong in Tampa Bay before anybody else. It's going to fall on him. So that can bring us to the final guy on my hot seat list. I think, Christian, you said you agreed with me on this one.
Yeah, spoiler, we had the same hot seat. Me and Pat.
Christian, great minds think alike, and we.
But I'll bring Bowles down one more. I'll bring Bowles.
So he's
down.
knocking Bowles down one, so we don't have the exact same list. But once again, when you talk about, and this might be the greatest example of it actually on this list, because you've seen the Bills as a perennial contender, a team flirting with the Super Bowl year after year under Sean McDermott, but losing in the playoffs when you have what many believe to be a top 2 quarterback is going to get old fast. And there have been times where this Bills team there have been times where they look like the better team. And there have been times when they've given Kansas City their best shot. But there have also been times where they've looked outclassed. There have been times where things can go horribly wrong for the Bills under Sean McDermott. My mind's for some reason that Justin Jefferson Vikings game from 2 years ago keeps popping into my mind of just a game that they had won and they couldn't close it. And it just feels like a continuing theme for the Bills. And I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, but when you have a top quarterback and he's getting paid like Josh Allen, is getting paid and will be getting paid for the rest of his career and the rest of his time in Buffalo, it's not going to be Josh Allen that gets kicked out of the role of power there. It's going to be Sean McDermott. That defense had better be competing with New York in terms of just fighting for that division. Hopefully, if you're the Bills, you're able to just rely on Josh Allen to be Superman this season, because there are some question marks on the pieces they put around him. So once again, the pressure is going to fall on Josh Allen on offense, but you know who the pressure is going to fall on most on that entire team is the defense. And Sean McDermott calling that defense, having to be the guy who answers when something goes horribly wrong, which it has seemingly every year for the Bills under him when you have great play under Josh Allen. So I think that based on how great Josh Allen is, that could be the pressure that's leading to me putting Sean McDermott on this list.
And I had Sean McDermott on warm just because if with the competitiveness in their division and how it's set up now to where, the Jets are going to be coming with, Aaron Rodgers and in a must-win state of their own. I think as the competitiveness of the division has risen and, the weapons you see around Josh Allen now, I think you've lost a lot of the foundational pieces of what that team was originally. I mean, Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs are both gone. They're both now division rivals of their own in the AFC South. So, and I think 4 division titles, a winning percentage that is between Andy Reid and Mike Tomlin. I mean, Sean McDermott, as we said, I mean, they're projected for another 10+ win season on the books at 10.5. I mean, we'll see what is going to come with that, but you're right, Pat. I mean, you put your money where your mouth is, and you're not going to move on from Josh Allen if this thing doesn't work out. So, yeah, I mean, Sean McDermott, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, putting him on warm with the expectations that I believe they could, at their very best, meet, and obviously would take the pressure off of him. But yeah, if it goes south, it's not going to go unpunished.
Yeah, one of the reasons I had him on the hot seat was really for past transgressions. I'm honestly shocked that he survived the media hit job last year on him with the 9/11 thing. I don't know how he kept his job after that, but that was insane. And I do think only reason he still has the job. So, yeah, let me see. This is the news article right here. Bills coach Sean McDermott apologizes for crediting 9/11 hijackers for their coordination while talking to team in 2019. You can read that article for yourself. But I just don't know why he's still coaching.
You could be prime Bill Belichick, and you would be on the hot seat just for that quote alone, and not even considering that he's a coach in New York State,
Buffalo, yeah.
At the same time,
but I think one of the few reasons he did keep his job this year was just because of how much was lost on the defensive side of the football from the year prior, losing guys like Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, key pieces to your defense. You lost Tre'Davious White a few years back. It seems kind of like this is a bridge year for those young guys on the defensive end. Milano being out for another full season sucks. It seems like they're just going to try and find out who the next core group of guys on their defensive side of the ball is. And I believe that's Sean McDermott's expertise, right? Is he calls the defense. So I think he's just going to really serve as like the bridge gap coach. But again, he can very easily win this division. So maybe you keep him because he wins the division. But I put him on my hot seat just for what happened last year. I cannot believe he kept that job.
Well, I mean, that headline is crazy, but I really I almost want to know what Bills fans think about this. when you have a great defensive coach like Sean McDermott and a guy who has led you to consistent success both in the regular season and postseason, even if he hasn't made it to the Super Bowl, but you have Josh Allen. And Josh Allen, you have no idea what he could be if you got a top offensive mind, if you got, say, a Ben Johnson to come from the Detroit Lions to be the mastermind behind a Josh Allen offense. That sounds terrifying to me as just a fan of an opposing team in the league. That would be a crazy move for them to make. But I think that they would, if I'm a Bills fan, I would prefer that to rolling the dice one more year with Sean McDermott in the same old defensive style that he's going to trot out 10-plus wins and a loss in the AFC Championship.
And, Pat,
give me the offensive coach.
I think
Joe Brady.
It is Joe Brady. But Pat, I think staying on that idea of a offensive minded coach, I think because there's so many, because the potential for the wide receiver room as, relative, I mean, Khalil Shakir stepped up, you brought in Curtis Samuel, and you have Keon Coleman. I think it's a mix of experience and potential in terms of weapons for Josh Allen. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it would almost benefit them to give Josh Allen an offensive-minded coach that's going to say, why don't we just try and outscore everybody, and you still have James Cook out of the backfield and using the weapons, and not to mention Dalton Kincaid. I think someone that puts that as a focal point rather than, leave the defense to a defensive coordinator. If you can focus on making Josh Allen the 1-2 in the league of what he is at quarterback and work into that, I think that would almost be something more that I'm sure Bills fans might agree that it might be something they want to see an offensive minded coach to take the reins on here if it's not going to work out with Sean McDermott. And you're going to find that out relatively early on because they're going to be tested right out of the gate this season.
Yeah, I don't know how close he is with Brandon Beane, if it's a relationship thing with him and Brandon. But yeah, or if maybe it's remorse for not hiring Leslie Frazier to a head coaching job. I don't know what it is, but I do think there are plenty of coaches out there who, I mean, for several job cycles now, even defensive coaches, I think that would have been better options than Sean at this point, even though he's really familiar with the group and the organization.
So, yeah, I mean, I think they could do better personally with that roster, with that quarterback. You could have a better coach than Sean McDermott. And I'm telling you right now, I might be saying pin it if that Buffalo job comes open and Ben Johnson gets the chance to work with Josh Allen next year. That could be a very interesting pairing if that opening presents itself.